right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. If everyone can rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flags missing. Come on it. Flagpole's right in front of the firehouse, so if we all just kind of point in that direction, I think we'll be fine.
Should we just do it? Okay. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That was invisible, not indivisible, right?
Well, thank you everybody for the creative shifting. Let's see, we are on agenda item B for the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt? So moved. Do I have a second? I'll second. Okay. Any discussion changes? No. Okay. Any comments from the public? Okay. Moving on to item C, the consent calendar. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Coming back to item B, the agenda, call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Now moving on to item C, the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Okay, and a second. Any discussion from the board?
Got all my questions answered.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I'll open it up to the public. Comments from the public? Stephen?
Yeah, so every month we get a report of lots of bills being paid. We get actually no information on the revenue, and that's really important because we can't understand the expenses without the revenue. For example, the graphics, I guess that's for the fall review. There's advertising revenue that should be offset with that, and if you want to present a true picture of the financial condition of the district, you need to include revenue and specific business that was conducted during the month. You could do an example: pool revenue, advertising revenue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we would have a much better feeling for what's going on. Otherwise, it just looks like a lot of money being spent. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay, bring it back to the board. Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item D, public comment, open time for items not on the agenda. Any comments, Stephen?
Yeah, so I usually come here every week. And those of you who don't know, I run a website, SaveMarinwood.org. I actually tape all these meetings, and I'm usually pretty angry because there's lots of stuff that's going wrong in the district, I feel. But I want to start off a little bit different. I saw Jeff the other day. He was in his swimsuit looking svelte and fit, and just reminded the fact that we're all neighbors. We all have a life outside here. And I saw a movie, and I'm going to quote a bit of poetry in honor of Leah, who was a poetry major at San Francisco State. It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you. So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well stay. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? So, of course, that was Mr. Rogers. And there's a certain beauty to that sentiment that we all need to keep in mind, that this is a community. We are neighbors. And, despite our differences, we all are living together, and let's make the most of this beautiful day. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Right here.
Thank you, Madam President. Last month, I watched the video and I heard Park and Rec Director complaining about the constant complaint person. I am that person. I'm the one that emails him regularly on the mini park, which apparently is not on the agenda for being taken care of. From the garbage, to the weeds, to the cleanup, to the drinking fountain. And I want to identify myself, and I think that Luke or whoever's in charge should get a program to daily empty the garbage, check the park, and check the drinking fountain, which doesn't work a lot of the times, as does like the Civic Center and other places which has drinking fountains. And I know I've discovered it in the other parts of the park. They don't work, they don't drain, and maybe we need new ones. I don't know. But I leave it up to the Park and Rec to take care of, because it's my taxpayer dollars, and I don't think that I should be the one that has to send them an email daily saying, hey, your garbage needs empty, your drinking fountain doesn't work, your park needs cleaned up, the weeds need cleaned up. And it sort of to be the forgotten bastard child in the service district. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments for items not on the agenda? Okay, moving on to item E, district matters. Item 1, regional wildfire prevention. Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority informational report. Turn it over.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President, Directors, ladies and gentlemen. In our continued quest toward improving wildfire prevention and preparedness, it's with my support as your fire chief that we bring forth a significant opportunity, regionally based, of creating the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and recommend accepting the report and provide direction. We're joined tonight by Marin County Battalion Chief Christy Neal, who oversees the vegetation and fuels management for Marin County and is also working on this initiative full-time. Informational meetings concerning this initiative are occurring throughout Marin County. In fact, there were 2 other presentations going on tonight. The Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is proposed as a multi-agency effort to fund, coordinate, and oversee wildland fire detection, fuel reduction, public education, defensible space evaluations, and local agency wildfire prevention efforts. It's of note that we had a 10-plus acre fire this afternoon in Nevada off Atherton, and fire is around us and could be present at any time. So we live within the midst and that danger. Over the past 10 years, your fire departments in Marin have created a seamless, unified response to send the closest available appropriate resource regardless of jurisdictional boundaries for emergency purposes. It's more efficient and effective. The proposed MWPA takes us a step further to regionally coordinate fire prevention efforts proactively. It's a force multiplier that will significantly enhance our ability to be a more wildfire resistant, sustainable, and a resilient community. The resources and synergy available through participation in the MWPA are above and beyond anything that we could muster on our own toward wildfire prevention, and will complement all of our local efforts. It's a significant undertaking, has far-reaching objectives and wide-ranging benefits. I'm confident that the creation and implementation of the authority will dramatically increase not only community safety, but firefighter safety in and around Marinwood, San Rafael, and Marin County. And it's clearly an example, in my view, of where together we're better. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Neal, and we've got a PowerPoint presentation we'd like to go through and a video to actually start things off to explain a little bit more about the authority. And I will tell you that we both just came from a meeting. This is a work in progress, so there's a lot going on to really form the authority, ensure that there's an appropriate level of governance, representation, and a lot of questions. Some we have answers for, some we want to be able to take those back and assure we provide those answers in the future. And it's our hope to come back to you in a month's time at the next meeting and talk a little bit more about this and be able to present to you a JPA agreement. So, Chief?
Great, thank you. Excellent introduction, and as Chief Grace said, there's multiple simultaneous meetings going on right now. So the president of the Marin County Fire Chiefs Association, Bill Tyler, he's in Novato, and my chief, Jason Weber, is in Ross Valley, San Anselmo tonight, doing the same thing. So thanks for having us, and we'll kick it off. I'll give you an overview, we'll watch a video, and then talk about the governance of what the JPA is and get some input and feedback from you all. Thank you.
Wildfires are bigger, burn longer, cause more damage, and kill more people than ever before. During the fire siege of 2017, when our friends to the north experienced that disaster, Marin was just one ignition source away from that occurring. We have the same fuel conditions, same weather, and same topography that drove that fire that night.
Wildfire risk is now a constant threat in California, especially in communities like Marin, with lush vegetation and development near significant areas of natural open space. Marin's natural beauty and abundant undeveloped lands are considered source fuel for a potentially devastating and fatal wildfire, similar to the ones that have ravaged Sonoma, Napa, Lake counties, and Paradise over the past few years. Many Marin neighborhoods are adjacent to wildlands because of a strong desire to live close to nature. Recent fire seasons have been longer, hotter, and among the deadliest and most destructive on record. The 260,000 residents of Marin receive fire protection and emergency response services from 19 separate cities, towns, fire districts, and the county, but there is no single agency responsible for coordinating wildfire prevention.
The threat of large destructive wildfires in Marin is real. And one of the most important lessons is that a fast-moving wildfire doesn't care about jurisdictional boundaries, but a coordinated large-scale effort to improve prevention and safety can make a difference, can save lives and property.
In response to the need for coordinated action to reduce wildfire risk in Marin, local fire agencies and municipal governments have proposed creation of a new Joint Powers Authority, the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. The new authority's mission would be to improve and oversee programs in early wildfire detection, improved alert and warning systems, resident evacuations, vegetation management and fire hazard reduction, defensible space property evaluations, educating the public about wildfire safety, and more.
This new fire prevention and mitigation program is designed to be in addition to, not in replacement of, the current fire prevention efforts currently in place in our Marin communities. The program is designed to bring all of Marin neighborhoods up to a defensible space standard to minimize loss from large damaging wildfires, while also allowing flexibility to address local needs. For example, some communities have local fire issues related to the need for improved fire patrols, road widening, increasing the vegetation removal along critical evacuation routes.
Some local community issues that can be addressed, for one, is improving your primary and secondary evacuation routes from your neighborhood. Many communities within Marin only have one way in and one way out. How we improve that is by removing hazardous vegetation that's located along the roadsides. A second issue to address would be improved defensible space inspection program. How that is involved is by allowing a cadre of inspectors to come into our community and to be able to consistently inspect every single property and give recommendations on how you can prepare your home to become more fire safe.
Currently, no dedicated source of funding exists for wildfire prevention and preparedness in Marin. Options for securing a dedicated funding source are being evaluated, including placing a local funding measure on the ballot in 2020 for voters to consider. It is estimated that approximately $20 million per year is needed to implement an effective, coordinated wildfire prevention program.
We've been lucky to avoid a major wildfire in Marin County, but luck is not a strategy. We need a good plan to make ourselves safer. Research and just plain common sense point out the need to have a coordinated county-wide wildfire prevention effort. It's been a long time coming, but I'm very excited to see all this come together.
In the coming months, cities, towns, and local fire agencies will have the opportunity to join the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and decisions will be made about securing dedicated funding for the authority's programs. To stay informed, please visit www.marinwildfire.org.
Okay, so I think you're all familiar the impacts that we've had in the last few fire seasons. 2017 and 2018 were the most deadly on record. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and the last few fire seasons have been quite amazing in terms of damage, destruction, size, intensity. And our fire seasons have become longer. They're 84 days longer than what they used to be in the 70s. And certainly Marin, we have enough vegetation to support high-intensity, fast-moving fires in Marin, certainly under extreme conditions like those that occurred in the 2017 fire season, where we saw not only all the smoke, but we had residents evacuating to our county as a result of those fires. And then 2018, with all that smoke for weeks on end that impacted Marin County, you know, we're just right down the road. And so we know that fire knows no borders, no jurisdictional boundaries. It's going to spread where the fuel is, where the weather's going to take it, and the slopes. We have 19 authorities that have taxing authority in Marin County, about 12 fire agencies. We have excellent mutual aid, as Chief Gray indicated, in our response, but we really, we have no single coordinating or authority for that pre-fire work. That is really taking a lot of time, and the public is demanding more education, more work on inspections, more information, understanding more about what they can do to minimize damage from wildfires. So I think we can tell that the problem's going to get worse in the future with climate change, denser forests and vegetation, and an increase in human ignitions. And so that's kind of the background of why we're here. Probably not surprising. This map is a recent modeling map out of the Community Wildfire Protection Plan that just displays flame lengths in a modeled fire scenario with an extreme weather day. Actually pretty similar to the weather we had a couple weeks ago. Pretty warm temperatures, dry, low relative humidity days, and a good southwest wind. This isn't even under the north wind red flag conditions that we see in the fall, which is just around the corner here. So those red areas are areas where we cannot directly attack fires. We need dozers, aircraft, and a lot of other resources to augment our direct attack. Those areas in the green, a little better, obviously. That's where we can actually sort of put people closer to the flames to do direct attack. But this is one weather scenario that happens on our warm, hot days in Marin. But just a course modeling to indicate that we do have a fire issue in Marin. So not every single day, but we definitely have those conditions. This slide, a couple points on this slide. Basically, insurance losses are increasing. There's an increase in people getting their policies not renewed or canceled. Overall, the rates for fire insurance are increasing. We're going to continue to see that. Companies are pulling out of California. They're trying to reduce the risk. And so it's becoming more difficult for folks to obtain and get new fire insurance. Just in the state last year, 6% of the residents had non-renewals had increased 6% last year. And We know that from the 2017 fires that many people, 70% of the residents there were underinsured, and that it was about $500 a square foot to rebuild their homes, and we're pretty sure that that'll be equal, if not more expensive here in Marin. So the impacts are real. Some of the background planning and analysis documents that we worked on way back before we've had these last really bad fire seasons, we put together a community wildfire protection plan. We needed this plan so that we could apply for state and federal grants. And it was a framework for us to try to identify, prioritize, and deal with our fire hazard reduction activities throughout the county. We were able to do some of that fancy modeling, utilizing our vegetation, overlaid with topography, and give it weather, and estimate fire behavior across the landscape, and then prioritize what areas that needed the greatest amount of protection. Obviously, where people are is super important, as well as surrounding communities and such, and so that was a guiding document that we use throughout the county right now for all of our work. The 2018 Lessons Learned document from the North Bay Fire Siege, the board of supervisors convened a committee in Marin County that brought in law enforcement, fire agencies, OES, and land management agencies to figure out what we could do different in Marin, but learn from the folks in Sonoma, since they had just experienced some significant events. We brought a panel of those folks down, and we talked with them about things that they would have done different or things that they could do different. And so we had a big long list of action items to be worked on for all the agencies essentially, and there were several items left over that needed a more programmatic, countywide approach, that we couldn't solve it individually. So those are referenced in that document as well, and then followed up by this last spring's the Civil Grand Jury Report, an independent audit that again identified the need for a creation of a joint powers authority and taking a new approach to solve some countywide issues to improve our wildfire preparedness and safety in Marin. So that proposal led to a joint wildfire prevention authority that involves local agencies, emergency service providers, cities, towns, the county of Marin, all working together under an umbrella to work on our wildfire prevention emergency preparedness issues. So some of the core elements of this program, we call first 4 chunks there the core, and we'll talk specifically about some of these, but some of the big topics and the number one concern of our residents in Marin is wildfire detection. How are they going to know about a fire, and how are they going to evacuate? So we certainly know that we have some improvements needed in the county for that. Certainly fire hazard reduction work, grants management, public education, and so that would make up the core of the program, and again we'll talk specifically about what this is, and then 2 other smaller elements that we'll talk about: defensible space evaluations and home hardening, with the ability for a local jurisdiction or agency to implement that themselves or have the JPA implement it. And then that last piece is the community level wildfire prevention mitigation. A portion of those funds would come back to the local jurisdiction to solve any local fire prevention issues that they had that they currently don't have funding for. So we'll talk about this. So, obviously one of the big items is wildfire detection, evacuation program improvements. There's lots of new technology out there that we probably aren't taking advantage of. There's studies that we need to conduct to help us figure out what the traffic flow issues are in Marin on a countywide scale, improve our mapping, identification of temporary refuge areas for the public so that we can keep up with the rapidly changing technology, and certainly improving any contraflow traffic planning and mitigations, mass vehicle movement, all those kinds of things. So there's a lot of work that can be done in this area that we really have minimal to no ability, because it is costly, and so there's work that needs to get done in this area. So that's a number one focus of the core program. One of the second elements has to do with fire hazard reduction, and our objectives are obviously to reduce combustible plants and vegetation that surround and are within so many Marin communities. We want to obviously protect communities and critical infrastructure, and we could utilize a combination of methods to do that with crews, equipment, prescribed fire, grazing, and obviously following environmentally sound practices. Environmental compliance would have to be done before we do that, but there's a lot of work for us to do, and this would be another core area where we could work together. So certainly there's benefits of a coordinated vegetation management and fire hazard reduction program. One of these pictures is goats grazing behind a community. In grass, that's pretty effective, but then there are communities that have a lot of brush and other vegetation that goats don't eat, so we need crews or equipment to help deal with that. So, and then, certainly there's community chipping, there's a variety of other mechanical methods that could be utilized as well. This is just it's kind of hard to decipher here, but this is an example of some coordinated fuel reduction. Those yellow blobs are ridge tops that have been grazed by goats, followed up by a hand crew coming in and limbing and pruning and piling any additional vegetation for removal, chipping. And so what we've done here is created speed bumps across the landscape to help slow fire spread. And this benefits multiple communities. In the middle there, Sleepy Hollow, they were the kind of the program coordinator with Parks and Open Space, private landowners, the school, the fire district, and Parks and Open Space. And so that joint effort benefits Terra Linda, Ross Valley Fire, or Ross Valley south of there. And so these are examples of things that we need to do on a bigger scale across our communities in Marin. Public education. The fear of fire from people right now is very high, and so we need to close that gap and help them understand better how to basically live with fire, because it's going to be here. It's not if, it's when. So some of this effort would be focused on supporting Fire Safe Marin, their community outreach and preparedness education programs, including supporting in a greater fashion our FireWise USA sites and programs. And you have a FireWise community here in Marinwood, and certainly they could use a boost of support funds, those kinds of things. And we were at the beginning of the year around 40 FireWise communities or FireWise sites in Marin, and we're anticipating as many as 60 coming on board here in the next couple months. So this is a huge workload for Fire Safe Marin, for the community leaders, helping to work with their neighborhoods and making them defensible. So that was the core program, the evacuation, alerting systems, warning system, evacuation planning, vegetation management, fire hazard reduction, grants to help communities or seniors that have access and functional needs, and certainly public education. So that's the core. So now we'll talk about another portion of the program, which will be a coordinated defensible space management program. And this is where the JPA could run this program for your district, or you could opt to implement it yourself with a portion of the funds. So that's where a cadre of inspectors would come and do home evaluations, inspections of all the community, all the residences in your jurisdiction. They would give them education on how to harden their homes so that they're more resistant to wildfire. Certainly talk to them about the flammable plants and a variety of defensible space issues around their properties. It would also include some grants to help support seniors and low-income folks that have access and functional needs, who probably shouldn't be on the roof cleaning out the gutters or doing those things because they need extra assistance. And then it would include some portion of a dedicated abatement program for those folks who have been counseled, warned, and all those things, and they still refuse to do any work. This would be a kind of a unified approach to deal with abatement. So defensible space. And then the next piece would be the local specific needs. So we know that a lot of jurisdictions have specific issues that they could use a boost in local funding to help deal with because they just don't have a lack of funds. For example, there might be problem areas where you want to increase fire patrols. There might be certain vacant parcels of land that need to be cleared off. There might be additional vegetation removal needed along critical evacuation routes that are specifically problematic for a specific community. Parking boxes, we have a lot of narrow one-way roads where we can hardly get our fire equipment into, and people are parked along all those roads with all kinds of trailers, trash cans, recycle, we can hardly get down the road and it's overgrown. And so certainly help designating places where people should park so that we can get through and people can get out is an example of some local things that some jurisdictions could use some assistance in dealing with. So, dedicated prevention funding, is really, we're talking about $20 million annually. It would be a stable source of locally controlled funding dedicated to wildfire prevention and mitigation. Any of those local funds would be to supplement, not supplant the existing funds currently being used for fire prevention. There's certainly a potential to put this on the countywide tax measure for the March 2020 election. Obviously requires 3/4 support to pass. And we know through recent polling and surveys of Marin voters that there's support for that. We'll talk a little bit about that. This would be certainly ongoing versus one-time grant funding and or grant dependence. We traditionally are chasing grants, but we're all competing for the same grants from the state or the feds. And so we're doing a hit and miss job of obtaining grants and working in one part of the county here, and then we're over here. So there's nothing connected or coordinated because there's really no good stream of funding. We know this work or some of these treatments are very expensive. That grazing, $600 an acre to graze an acre, and certainly, the grass grows back the next year. So once you're treating some of these landscapes to protect communities, you have to come back and continue to do the maintenance. You can't just touch it once and walk away. So those treatments are expensive, and so and we again don't have any of that pre-fire funding to pay for that. We're a suppression, response-oriented departments, and things have changed, and so we need to change with it. So a little bit more about the expenditure plan. This is, conceptual, but an estimated 12 million of that 20 would go to those core program areas, and then smaller portions, 20% to the other two areas, defensible space and home hardening, and then community level prevention mitigation. So, for example, that community level wildfire prevention and mitigation would be an example of that 20% coming back to Marin would be about $65,000 would come back to your board for local control to deal with fire prevention issues. And so you probably don't have that now, so it would probably help.
For the budget.
It would help boost dealing with some of the issues that you have that you can't pay for. And then again, the defensible space home hardening program, you could opt to have the JPA do those defensible space inspections and home evaluations, or you could opt to take that money and hire your own inspectors or do it a different way, but the money has to be spent on defensible space. So, Godby Research, which is a California-based company who has major clients in California and has done a lot of work here in Marin. We're the subject matter experts in the polling and obtaining public opinion. So they conducted a poll in June of all the voters in Marin, or at least the demographics, and polled against putting something on the March 2020 primary election to kind of test community support for either a sales tax increase, which was proposed by the grand jury report, or a flat rate parcel assessment or an 11 cent, up to an 11 cent per square foot of the building, you know, the constructed building, not a parcel, but the building on that property. And we actually just saw a draft of the parcel tax study, and it looks actually probably closer to 10 cents a square foot would do the trick or do the job. And so you can see that it pulled pretty well, the 11 cents per square foot. And, you know, certainly in different jurisdictions and different parts of the county, it pulled differently, but consistently the up to 11 cents per square foot pulled the best throughout the entire county. Part of this effort obviously is going to have some fiscal accountability. All funds have to stay local and can't be taken to the state. Many of you probably paid the SRA fee a few years ago, $170 a property, and that money, you know, minimally came back to Marin. We got a couple grants, but all that went to the state. We never saw the money that was collected in Marin. So these funds would stay here locally, be controlled here locally by a board, and the money would have to be used for fire prevention mitigation and can't be diverted. There would obviously be independent oversight, not only fiscally, but also from a citizens oversight group. There would be annual reporting of financials and annual audits. There are several JPAs that are well functioning in Marin, so this is a common, JPA is not a new conception or concept. And then there would be some exemptions available for low-income seniors, and it would also help us qualify for state and federal grants that otherwise might go to other counties, because the JPA would hopefully have shovel-ready projects, would be able to leverage resources and funding in terms of match. A lot of federal grants need a matching, and a lot of times we have a hard time with the match. So let's talk a little bit about what this governing board of directors might look like. And I can say, and Chief Gray and I just got out of a JPA meeting today where there's been a lot of discussion about the representation on this board, and I can tell you that it will be different than this, but it's basically divided up into 5 geographic areas, and this mimics our paramedic authority that works very well in the county right now. Geographically, we work well together under that authority with these geographic areas, but essentially we've got in that light green area would be Novato, followed by San Rafael in the reddish purple, more of central Marin, and then the green southern Marin, Mill Valley, and then West Marin with some of the small districts and such. And so there was a lot of discussion today about the membership on this board, and it could actually be as many as 19 members, but this is what we've been presenting to everybody, and certainly through feedback, more people want to be on that board of directors. So we are definitely making some adjustments based on feedback. But generally, the governance structure, including a citizens oversight committee, would look something like a board of directors, which would be made up of electeds from each of those geographic areas, and you know, the electeds set policy. The operations and budget committee would be made up of fire chiefs, town managers, etc., of an 11-member group. And then the advisory committee would be land management agencies. They could be parks and open space. It could be PG&E. It could be other technical staff or members, subject matter experts that are needed to help feed projects, provide advice and technical expertise to pull together that structure and help prioritize and lay out the project funding and program of work. Of course, there'd have to be, you know, a big program of work, a strategic plan, all of those things. Right now, we utilize our community wildfire protection plan that has a number of projects in there that have no funding. So I think we talked a little bit about why the JPA, a coordinated effort where we could all work together to implement a comprehensive mitigation and prevention plan, pooling of resources, and access to a variety of people, equipment, and such to do the work that we need to do. And 20 million, the work is it's a lot of money, but the hardest assets to obtain are some of those fire, fuels and fire crews, veg crews, equipment, grazing. That stuff is pretty expensive. And so when you look at the vast amount of acres in Marin that need work, certainly that 20 million and broken up into those program areas is what we think the cost of the program could be to make a difference. We need to make a difference in fire behavior. And then how are the land managers, Parks and Open Space, the Park Service, the Water District, how do they participate in this effort? Well, they would be coming together in that advisory board. We'd be bringing all the projects together. We don't have to stop doing work on a jurisdictional boundary. This money could be spent across jurisdictional boundaries. Certainly, those who are already spending money are going to continue to bring that money to the table. So Parks and Open Space, they are spending about $3 million a year in Measure A funds for fire hazard reduction. They're currently hiring one of our fire crews to do work behind communities, and so certainly they're going to continue that work. The Water District has some limited vegetation management funds, but we all know that we need to protect that watershed. That's the drinking water for Marin, and we don't want it to burn up, and so we want to do some strategic work, certainly next to communities, to protect communities as well as protecting the watershed. So timeline and next steps. So this last month, pretty much the last several weeks, we're doing presentations to all the town councils, fire boards, fire districts, and such, gathering feedback. They're still working on the Joint Powers of Authority, that governance document, and finalizing some of the actual verbiage for the measure. We'll have another draft JPA to review. There's currently one on the website if anyone wants to pull that down and take a look at it. And we're getting really close to finalizing that JPA. So then we'll need to come back to all those same boards, councils, and entities that have taxing authority and ask you to adopt a resolution that would support, if you want, joining the JPA and having the Board of Supervisors put it on the March 2020 ballot. So that has to happen by the end of October. And so the board would adopt a resolution, putting it on the ballot in November, and then I guess we'll see what happens on the March 2020 ballot. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, and certainly happy, and Chief Gray will help me answer any questions you might have or clarifying things. So.
All right, well, thank you so much for that presentation. That was very informative. I'd like to open it up to the board for any questions, comments, feedback.
Yes. I attended a meeting, Marin Ready Together, a while back, and certain members that are participating in that forum were concerned about the amount of oversight, or I think they refer to it as bureaucracy, that goes along with such a JPA. And it does seem that there's a number of groups that are going to be having some sort of function for this. But I also heard a comment, I think, from the city manager, San Rafael, indicating that there was going to be substantial leverage of existing agencies in managing this JPA. Is that correct?
That is correct, because the JPA is not going to hire any pensioned employees. They can either contract, they could contract with San Rafael to provide some of those services, HR or accounting, those kinds of things, where they could hire, a termed employee that would not be pensioned, 401k would be all. So they can do a variety of those kinds of things without having pensioned employees and having a giant overhead. So.
I see. Okay, fair enough. This is probably a silly thing, but in our community, there's been quite a bit of these things called bulb outs. where they bulb out the sidewalks in order to make it easier for pedestrians to get across. It seems to me that that flies in the face of appropriate evacuation, from our community. And I'm just wondering, is anyone thinking about that at all? Because we're getting them now quite frequently. We're about ready to get some others in our neighborhood. And whereas I think on Miller Creek, which is going to be one of the major thoroughfares to evacuate here, we could probably get 2 cars down each side of the median, but with those bulb outs, that's not going to happen. There are going to be choke points all along.
Gotcha.
So there's a, there's definitely a dichotomy between daily safety and emergency safety, if you see what I'm saying. But it sounds like most of the evacuation issues are about vegetation and cars parked where they shouldn't be and that kind of thing.
I think it's a mix. I think that area is pretty wide open. There's, I think, a lot of things that we could do different, and we just need to, start doing some of the work, some of the studies, and trying to figure out what makes sense. So certainly those kinds of things could be considered, or at least some technical advice on the rollout.
No, it's a good comment, and I think we can evaluate that further. It's much like, speed bumps, what impact do they have on a regular basis?
Sure.
And I think the power of this is actually the unified approach and the recognition that, yes, we're all interconnected when it comes to a fire, but we also are day-to-day, and for evacuation purposes, there's a lot of things, I think, when you study it closely, you're going to determine, why didn't that street continue? Why aren't those neighborhoods connected?
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't they be?
Mm-hmm.
We're also in the process of developing a baseline evacuation map that we're going to also provide to Marinwood and Lucas Valley residents. That's going to lay out primary and secondary evacuation routes. Think URLs, and it's being designed. In fact, we just signed a contract to do it. But it's a blend of both cognition and communication. So these maps are very easy to read, and they're neighborhood by neighborhood. And they'll actually show you your way out in multiple. Obviously, we know some neighborhoods, they only have one way in and out. But many have multiple ways. And it's just another effort that I think, by coordinating it, we're going to put a spotlight on all those areas that need improvement, and have increased capacity and focus to prioritize changing them. And maybe, in things like you bring up, Director Naylor, this issue of the bulb outs, the pros and cons of those. And while there may be some benefits, there's also some significant drawbacks. If it's diminishing required width in a primary evacuation route, and or egress route for emergency responders.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, did you have some? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chiefs, for the presentation. I applaud the unified effort from all the communities of Marin County. I don't disagree, wildfire is definitely a common thread, and whatever can bring us working together, I'm all for it. My concerns are probably similar to Director Naylor, with the increased bureaucracy and potential expenses of this joint power authority. I would like to know specifically if, for example, the countless directors that will be sitting on the board will be compensated, and what the compensation would be. Our board is all volunteers, but it is not uncommon in other districts or boards to be paid for an effort. So I would definitely want to be frugal there. The fact that we have to create yet additional bureaucratic creature is mind-boggling to me, because intuitively I would want all our fire departments to be working together all the time as one fire department.
Yes.
And I don't understand why we can't just go that route and create cost savings by reducing administrative weight and put the money towards vegetation management, wildfire prevention, etc. This, I guess I might be naive, but this would be for me the preferred way to go.
That's good feedback, Director Perry. In fact, this has been brought up multiple times. I will tell you, I believe it's a framework for the future to build upon. And I think if we do this right, wildfire prevention and mitigation is just the start. But as I know, Chief Neal and the other chiefs that have been going around to the different jurisdictions, we're finding there are a lot of local issues. And some of which, you know, and you've probably heard me say this before, fire service is one of those, the most transportable that there is. We literally take a fire engine and we drive 500 miles to the south to provide service. And there's no reason why we can't knock down the border, the jurisdictional borders, for the purposes of providing day-to-day fire service as well. I just don't have that solution for you today. But I believe that this framework will apply as a foundation and a building block that I think we can add additional shared services as we move forward here. So I would like to think we'd had a better solution. And I'm also committed to the comments related to the bureaucracy and minimizing that. And whether it's frugal or not, we want to make sure this is an example of good government and sharing services and taking full advantage of the economies of scale so that we can reduce the costs and be more efficient and more effective. That's the key, to do it cheaper and better and in a unified way, so that if you do everything right as a community and your community next door does nothing, we're not at risk. And that way we've got everyone doing, and this is our best, I think, shot and attempt at being able to do that. And as you said, unified approach.
I think also in the meeting that I attended, similar comments to Director Perry's were voiced. And one of the, I guess, missing concepts was that this is an additional program. Fire departments that are there on call 24/7 to deal with emergency services are not the people that are going to do this work.
Correct. Correct.
This is an extra
Yes.
service that
Yes.
needs to be funded, and it's important for people to know that.
Right.
So, thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I do agree with both of my co-directors about the funding and making sure that we're grow. But so in that sense, so when you guys were talking about the JPA coming in and helping with mitigation in neighborhoods and stuff, the people that are not doing what they were asked to do, is that building on Firewise that a community already has, or if a community has not managed to make themselves a Firewise community? Would this be instead of that?
I think it could be both. Certainly, some level of home evaluations is probably needed in Marinwood, so that there's some actual technical advice being given to homeowners on how to reduce the flammability of their vegetation surrounding their house, the actual house itself hardening to make it more resistant to embers and fire. And so people need that. I've driven around in Marinwood and you have a lot of vegetation right up against the sides of the house, very flammable vegetation. And so I think there's certainly some education that could help residents understand what they can do, and as an effort for whole streets and numerous streets to be more defensible and work together as neighborhoods, then that's where Firewise comes in, where it could be a community effort. And so helping folks build on that and work towards being Firewise.
So we still need to keep pushing.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Firewise. Okay. Thank you.
All right, I'll just add in my 2 cents and then open it up to the audience. I see the idea of the framework being laid for something bigger. I am feeling unsettled. There's something that feels very slick and packaged and rushed about a tax increase. And I don't like the model of the per square foot. And if that's not what the grand jury recommended, like, I would not vote that way. I would go with what the grand jury recommended. I think it's more equitable. And I don't know. I mean, I can't say like yes or no, because weighing the personal versus the whatever, but I think what would look like a better faith effort is all of these agencies pitching in together to figure out how to do this with the resources that we have. Or maybe not $20 million a year. I have a hard time understanding why this would cost so much money and why we need to fund it the way that we're being told that it will be happening in March. Because I also think that opening up that vein of local communities with that type of money and our own fire issue related stuff, and the fact that we might need to be going to our voters for a tax initiative next year too. I mean, it's sort of like, neighborhood versus county. So I mean, I see it, but the timeline of it, I would have to, have more information on, just to line up with the district. So, but I'm glad that everyone's talking about it. I'm glad that this seems to be the future. But I don't know how much money it cost to make this movie or who paid for it. But again, I sort of think like that probably cost money that maybe could have been spent doing the work rather than telling us about it. And so maybe some people need that, but again, the efficiencies of, I don't need a slick video. I would just like whatever it is that, so, thank you.
Well stated, thank you.
Excuse me, who's going to take? Opening to the public, Ron?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Number one, you gave a figure for the goats grazing. What is the cost per acre?
$900.
Okay. How would County Service Area 13, who would be the contact person if we wanted to engage goats to graze on our open space?
We could get you in contact with the contractor who runs the goats.
Okay,
Fire Safe Marin has a contact.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's $900 an acre.
Mm-hmm.
All right, also, I think you should add County Service Area 13 and County Service Area 19 at Santa Venetia to your list of unincorporated communities that may or may not be represented on the overall committee.
So they would be represented by either Santa Fe or Marin County in the
Marin
CSA,
County.
in the county
Marin
CSA.
County.
They would be represented by the county.
Well, we have a problem with your department. And we can't get you to cut the weeds on the county farm.
Parks
And
open
I think it
space
should be a
land.
matter that's brought to the Board of Supervisors. Because for 40 years, the weeds were cut every year.
Wait, Ron, are we jumping off topic here? Sorry, can we stay?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Can we stay on topic? I don't want to jump too far out.
Well, this is part of the whole program, but this is an ongoing discussion because County Parks and Open Space Director thinks the lizards and the birds are more important than the people, because if we do have an ignition in Lucas Valley with our 40-mile-an-hour winds, we're going to lose houses on Appleberry and Idleberry in Marinwood. And as far as I'm concerned, the residents are the endangered species right now, not the lizards and the birds, because for the first 40 years of cutting, the birds and the lizards always came back. So it wasn't a death knell. And that's just an ongoing problem we have in CSA 13. And I echo what Isabella said about be careful about creating another huge, expensive bureaucracy and spending more money on the bureaucracy than necessarily on projects. Because this is a danger that lurks, I think, in all government programs. You got to be alert against an entrenched, very large bureaucracy, rather than having skilled administrators make the decisions. Thank you.
Stephen, and Bill?
Well, first of all, I'd like to ask a question. I thought CAL FIRE was the experts in wildfire management. I don't know how it works when there's like the fire and how the command structure works, but I thought they were in charge of everything. And so I'm a little confused what you're trying to create here. So just a question, maybe educate me on how wildfires are fought in California.
So CAL FIRE contracts to us, Marin County Fire Department, for the protection of state responsibility area, which is a good chunk of West Marin.
But the question is command structure. What I don't see here is command structure. I see taxation, but I don't see accountability. I see agencies, and one of the problems with JPAs is they have power to tax, power to impose laws, and they can issue grants, but if you have no political power, for example, if you're Ron and your number one issue is that field next to his house, you may not get any money. And so it's not like we don't see the benefits of having experts in command structure. If it's not there, it's like, you know, what are you actually doing? So I don't know. I guess you're saying CAL FIRE actually answers to you, that if there was like a huge fire, who would be in charge?
We would here in Marin, either the county of Marin, the Marin County Fire Department, or
So
if it's on local jurisdiction, then it would be the local fire agency.
Okay.
The state contracts again to Marin County Fire to protect their portion of the wildlands.
So each fire chief is their own.
Yes.
It's like they're the ones that are in
Yes.
charge if it happens
In their jurisdiction.
in their jurisdiction.
Correct.
Okay. So the other issue is here in Marin County, like many jurisdictions, we have some fire agencies that are really, quite frankly, out of control as far as pensions, as far as overtime. I mean, they're getting paid crazy amounts of money. It seems like what we're doing is keeping the fiefdoms and adding something on top. And what is needed, I actually, you know, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I actually agree with all the neighbors and Ron tonight. I think we need a better way of going about it. It's the command structure that we need before the taxation. We need the administrative way that this is going to be implemented. I certainly couldn't support anything where we're sharing one vote with 5 other unincorporated districts. We have, I mean, it's just, we'll send you $100, you send us back 20, and you know, it's not a good deal for us. So I think you guys, I do have the faith in the expertise that the professionals have here in Marin. What I want to see is I want to see that agency created and really grapple with some of the huge issues that we need to grapple with and frankly cut down some of the administrative duplication.
Thank you. Bill?
Yes, I have a question for you. As I know Ron's aware, last almost 50 years, we used to have in the 70s and early 80s, many fires in the summer up behind Appleberry, Miller Creek, up the hill, and coming from the west into Blackstone Canyon, because I remember several summers and my neighbors being up on the roofs hosing them down. What has changed from then to make it such an urgent matter now versus back then in fire danger?
So we talked a little bit about today's vegetation, the overgrown vegetation, the lack of historic fire, the lack of vegetation management. on current lands and around properties and communities. It just keeps growing, it doesn't go away. And then we've got longer fire seasons. They're 84 days longer today than they were in the 70s. So our period of vulnerability is much greater. We have more people built out in the wildlands living, and we have vegetation that can support fairly high intensity, fast moving wildfires. And it's just a matter of ignitions on a day where we can't pick it up.
Well, I'm just looking at Marinwood, Lucas Valley, being here for 48 years, and the vegetation hasn't changed, the homes haven't changed except for Regency Estate going in, which took out the fire trail up there, and easy access. So the vegetation hasn't changed and all that stuff, so what is our area? Our area hasn't changed, or I don't quite understand, having been here. And I haven't seen the threat change. Looking at Mill Valley, that threat going up one hasn't changed. Going up on the Tam watershed hasn't changed. So I'm trying to figure out where we're going.
Can we kind of rein this in to put
Yeah.
this in here? Okay, because it's not meant to be a back and forth, it's just comments.
So this is asking about why do they need the money and what are they planning to do?
I understand, so, but I'm gonna move on to the next comment, so thank you. Did you have a comment there?
Sure, I just would say I've lived here 25 years and we haven't had those fires up in the hills. And so I would venture to say the vegetation has changed and that hasn't been cleared out and burned to, like that healthy burn.
We haven't
to
had
then
that burn every year, yeah.
Right, we haven't had that. And so
Because we had an arson.
that has built up to, I think vegetation has increased. And you can see it in all of our neighbors and all of our yards if we don't clear it.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Go ahead.
I have a couple questions. Is there, I see the Citizens Oversight Committee, is that included in the JPA agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there a sunset to the JPA or a reevaluation after 10 or 15 years?
There's a check-in, I think every 5 years, and then I think it's still being determined on the actual sunset date if it's what the polling showed us. They polled 8, 10, and 18 years, or in perpetuity
Until repealed by voters.
repealed by voters. And repealed by voters was what was the popular answer.
So it would take a lot of effort from the neighbors to get it repealed. It's not, what does the check-in mean when you talk about a check-in?
The check-in is basically to reevaluate the proportion of the funds, if it's being distributed in those core areas, if there would be any adjustments to that, more being towards defensible space inspections and less to another program area. It could be, I think, a variety of things. I'm not sure what the JPA says in terms of all the aspects of the fire
So
check-in.
annual reporting, there would be actually a higher frequency than even annual, but annual reporting and then a 5-year check to make sure the distribution of the funds was being used for the highest priorities. And so if you consider where we're just talking about fuels, and if you examine, and most of us are historians of fires and we pay attention to what, so we can learn to make future decisions. If you look at the Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa, there was another fire 50 years prior to that occurred in the exact same area, and it traveled in the same places. The difference was more fuel and homes. There wasn't any really significant difference other than that. More fuel and more foam. It grew and it died off, and it grew and it died off, and it wasn't removed. And so part of this, if we remove some of the legacy fuels by a whole different combination of effects, we'll hopefully be in a maintenance mode and create these buffers, and then we'll be able to address other things with the project funding.
And I live 2 blocks away, so my neighbors have juniper and cypress. Is there something that's going to happen similar to San Rafael where that's banned or managed?
Currently, all of the agencies in Marin are evaluating fire prevention codes for an upcoming adoption, and that's one of the considerations that's being made or to ban certain species in a similar way to Marin. Mill Valley just went and did that last week. They were also pursuing a ban of brush and shrubbery within 5 feet of the home, and that turned out to be a recommendation rather than a requirement. But much like San Rafael, 0 to 30 feet, junipers and bamboo and these others that you mentioned, cypress, acacias, those other plant types would be restricted. So
would it be the Board of Supervisors for unincorporated?
right. And we'll get a chance to act on that locally and reviewing that here in Marinwood on those code amendments.
Thank you.
All right, anything else from the public?
Yes, I represent the Lucas Valley Homeowners Association Fireways Committee, and for your benefit in the public record, we strongly support the JPA initiative, primarily because it does what has not been done before. There's the prevention side that needs most of the work. Our first responders have yet to fail us. Although they've never been tested to the degree that our risk presents Marin County with disaster, our first responders would not be here in front of you asking for this prevention support if they had the ability to keep that disaster from happening without action taken on the part of the public. We truly need education of our property owners. I've heard a couple of comments in the room. Some mistake the JPA for a fire management process. It is a fire prevention effort, not a fire management process. Other issues about what hasn't changed, it looks like it's the same thing it was 50 years ago. Well, there are 3 things that have happened, not just the continued growth of vegetation that hasn't been burned out, and the incursion of additional properties being built, many in very close proximity to each other. The third thing that has changed, and we need to really pay close attention to it, is fire science has advanced dramatically. And if we don't learn from the current state of the art, it's tremendously foolish. We know today that junipers growing next to your home are a great deal more of a concern than the grasslands growing 100 feet from your home. And yet we don't pay attention to that. We've got 50 years worth of vegetation that represents very substantial risk that was not recognized even 10 years ago. So those are some of the lessons that we need to learn. So educating our property owners and educating contractors in what needs to be done to help find solutions to fixing those aesthetic problems as well as the physical risks, that's a key concern. Another is we need to encourage our residents to take action, and to take action with some incentives that will help them make the right decisions. Because it's not easy to go change 50 years worth of landscaping overnight. We have to provide them with good solutions and good alternatives that are a reasonable balance between the safest thing you could do and the things that are going to make our communities the places that we still like to live in. But we also need to enable our first responders, our agencies, and our community organizations with the expectation of reasonable and consistent enforcement of regulations. And that's, I think, what we've just heard is underway in most of our communities. That truly needs all of our support, because it makes no sense to have a good, solid, consistent regulatory framework and a set of standards in one community when the one next door has nothing. I think it was said that fire really has no boundaries, and that is true. So if this community closes its eyes to its responsibilities, to itself, it has an impact on its neighbors. We can't lose sight of that. And finally, if we don't have consistent enforcement in our regulations, we truly will have the continued state of chaos that we have today. Marin has some places with good enforcement and good standards and good public relations between the enforcing agencies and the residents. That doesn't exist everywhere. And I personally believe that we do not need an army of enforcers and ticket writers. We need the education to help residents understand the risk, enable them with incentives to help mitigate that risk. And at the same time, we need to make sure that they are self-regulating as opposed to putting a huge burden of bureaucratic regulation on top of what we already have. I don't think that's what any of our first responder agencies are advocating. They're asking for more resource. We have to be responsible in giving them that resource with the appropriate public oversight of the citizen council as opposed to making it a part of our bureaucratic government. And finally, I will say I have made a fair amount of effort in the last couple of months to try to make some changes in our local community and run into the kinds of obstacles that this JPA will actually help to overcome. Our existing structure, our community and county agencies are not set up to solve problems that are multi-jurisdictional easily on the prevention side. If we're responding to an emergency and a disaster, they do an excellent job on the fire side. And I think they do an excellent job on the law enforcement side. But on the prevention end, we are woefully inadequate.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Go.
Just a quick point of information. The major wildfires in the open space in Marinwood and Upper Lucas Valley were caused by a serial arsonist.
Correct.
And he was apprehended.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Ron.
All right, thank you, everybody. Let's move on to item E2, update on pension liability analysis with August 2019 release of CalPERS annual valuation reports. Jeff, do you want to take this over?
Why don't you take it? Okay. Boy, thanks for that lead in, by the way, Chief Ray. So now we have another topic in and around safety and urgency services that is particular to Marinwood and Marinwood's ability to fund such a function. As you probably are aware, Marinwood's revenues are primarily taxes and fees, as well as the recreation fees that we get here, but they're tax levies. We do not have sales tax revenue here in Marinwood. Every year, CalPERS puts out a report on the pension liability that all of the services have, and I've, over the last 3 or 4 years, put together an analysis which is now up to a 5-year analysis of what's happening to our pension liability in Marinwood. And so this document that I've put out is simply a synopsis of those 5 years of data. In this period of time, in the last 3 years, CalPERS has been reducing their discount rate that they use as their benchmark to evaluate what they need in terms of pensions from 7.75% to 7%. This was the last year of their quantitative easing. What does that mean? That essentially means that these liabilities that are building up for pensions will inflate because they're presuming a smaller return on investment. Many people feel that 7% is still way too high. In fact, over the last 10 years in which the economy has been in a bull market, they've realized somewhere in the neighborhood of 5.6% return on their investments. Why is this important? Well, it's important for a number of reasons. The operating assumption that CalPERS sold is that at least 70% of the value of the pensions will be made up by investment returns, and they're falling short. Unlike a private pension in which, oops, we didn't quite make the returns we were expecting, so we're going to lower the amount of the value of the pensions, public pensions are guaranteed. And state law right now indicates that if we were to negotiate a lower pension with our firefighters, we would have to give them something in return for that. So our pensions continue to grow, and if we take a look at the percentage return on investment over the last 10 years of a bull market at being less than 7%, which it was, and with the specter of a recession, which is bound to happen sometime soon, what CalPERS does is they put in an evaluation of what would happen if the return on investment over a protracted period was 6% rather than 7%. Our liability in that instance, instead of $5.1 million, and this is, by the way, money that has to be paid for by the taxpayers, okay? Instead of 5.1 million, it would be 7.7 million, which is quite a bit more than our annual budget is now and will be in 10 years. Okay, so back to the tables. For all intents and purposes, the last couple of years, 2017 CalPERS had a very nice return on investment of about 12 or 13%. Our unfunded liability continued to go up. It did not go down. Last year they had an investment return of about 8%. Again, our liability continued to ratchet up. And the question is why? Well, back in 2007, CalPERS sold a pension plan called the 3 at 50 to the entire state with virtually no analysis, and both the government, the state government, and the governor, Gray Davis, accepted it because CalPERS said it would never, ever touch taxpayer money. It would be self-sustaining. Marinwood, which I said earlier, does not have anything other than no sales tax revenue at all. We are a special services district where the taxpayers provide 90% of our income. Granted this 3 at 50 to firefighters here in Marinwood, and that is our problem. The reason that we are bringing this up on an annual basis is because our situation is deteriorating, the liability is getting larger every year, and so are the cash payments that CalPERS demands that we pay every year to make up for the shortfall. Right now, in the second table, you can see that by 2023-24, Marinwood would have to pay $725,000 in cash. This is not, a liability that's going to happen somewhere in the distant future. These are cash payments that are competing with the funds that we need to run our facilities, our recreation department, our parks department, and pay salaries. So it's becoming a larger issue, and again, this $725,000 is a tacit admission by CalPERS. Our investments aren't keeping up, and they aren't. So, to make a long story short, this is an unsustainable model for this district, and we have approached LAFCO for help in deciding if there is some way that we can find a different model to provide. We all know we need firefighters and emergency services people. We just don't need, or we cannot continue to fund an independent emergency services department, and we need to find another model. So we've enlisted LAFCO to look at this and to help us with this. as the last almost 4 years have certainly indelibly etched in my mind, nothing happens quickly. This is going to be a long-term process, and we're going to need support from the community and certainly support from LAFCO and communities and departments around us to come up with an equitable solution.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the public? Ron?
Yes, I was sitting in this very room at a CSD board meeting when Genevieve Boulding, the business manager in Marinwood, assured the board of directors that they could raise the pension for the firefighters from 2.5% at 30 to 3% at 30 because the fund was doing so well that it would not cost Marinwood taxpayers another penny to raise it from 2.5 to 3. And unfortunately, it's taken a very long time for the public to begin to realize that 3% 30 is unobtainable without sales tax revenue. There's just no way a small district can.
Thank you.
Although if Marinwood would invest,
we need to move on, Ron. We've spent
would
like an
invest their
hour.
money in my hedge fund, I guarantee I could get you 7%.
Thank you. All right, Stephen?
Yeah, so while pension, I always appreciate this discussion, Jeff. I'm glad that you're looking at this. While pensions are a huge issue that we need to constantly be aware of, they're really not the only issue. The other issues are the number of pensionable employees. We've grown the number of pensionable employees over the last few years. We have also embarked on very expensive legal adventures which have cost the district dearly. And we're doing a building project which seems to have no price tag. Hang on for a second, I am talking about the pension issue.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am. And I would appreciate it if you not interrupt me because that's rude and it's you're impacting my ability to speak to the board. We need to do things in a different way here. We need bold movement. I feel like this pension issue, it's the slow-moving iceberg, and we all know where it ends up. But what we really need to do is we need to start looking at fire service. We can't have our fire service and 70% of that effort go to San Rafael, and we have the pension liability. We have to look at the number of employees that we have because, quite frankly, it's going up and that's not being addressed. We made some mistakes in the past. Let's not make mistakes in the future. There's things we can do today, and that's where we need to stay focused. And that's why I encourage you to continue on with the pension issue, but look at it from a winner's way that we can succeed here, because I don't see success in the making here.
We're going to
and
Stephen, we need to
I'm going to interrupt you again.
No.
Please do not interrupt me
Stephen,
while I
it's been
speak.
3
That
minutes.
is not only is that rude. I'm sure you're a nice person outside of this. You don't talk to people like that, and I don't accept that because
Stephen, it's
every
been
time,
3
excuse me,
minutes.
and
This
you
is your warning.
too,
You're
that
out
if
of
you
line.
you can warn all you want because you do not have a right to talk over me, just as I don't have a right to talk over you.
Okay, I'm going to call a recess.
Go ahead.
Pass out.
I've finished my comments. there's not, you go to county meetings, there's no equivalent to what happens on the county level in other districts where the interruption like that occurs. So if you want to do that, if you want to call the police, we'll sort it out in the courts. But I actually have quite a bit of evidence here of how my rights have been impacted
So
by your
I'm
actions.
going to start the meeting again. We are going to jump in at we're going to start at item E3, Marinwood CSD Board of Directors Administrative Calendar. This is a review item. Has everyone had a chance to review it?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, any comments?
Yes.
Right, go ahead.
If I may suggest adding to the calendar, the energy review of how our, solar panels and are performing, and also on an annual basis, once we do have a strategic plan review would be, I think, in order. Also looking at the fiscal matters, you mentioned Measure A review for June. I think it would make sense to review it together with the capital assets.
Which I think it is.
So it says fall and spring for the capital assets. I personally think that once a year capital assets review would be sufficient, but that's my personal opinion. I'm open to whatever, but I think it makes sense to do it together, the Measure A capital assets, and to do both of those before the budget review.
Yeah, understood. I think the Measure A review is something that Eric discussed, if I can reply.
Yeah. Sorry.
Eric discussed because he then becomes aware of what Measure A is going to be in the following year.
Oh.
You see what I'm saying? So we'll be operating under the capital asset review, sort of periodically, okay? But that will be based on the previous year's measure.
Yes,
Yeah.
I understand. Okay, makes sense. And then, the same with Measure A. Okay, that makes sense. The Park and Rec, Measure A. So the audit presentation, we do audit presentation January, February, but that's for the year that finished.
Yeah.
Previous fiscal year.
Yeah, right, June. Is there any way to have it sooner, just so we can have more of an immediate?
I think it takes them that long to
It
do
takes
it.
them quite a bit of time.
That many months, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. That's the way it's been. I mean, I don't want to fall back on well, that's because it's the way it's always been. But I think we're not their only client, and, they can only schedule so much time with our administrative staff. So, it takes a while to churn through things.
Okay, I just have to be patient, and I think there's no. Thank
There could
you,
be.
that's all from me.
Okay. Anything else from anybody else?
No, this is just meant to be, something not only for this board, but for future boards to just, be able to plan, hopefully attendance, I'm speaking for myself here, know when some of the big ticket items are gonna be happening and when we should be around for them.
It's fabulous, that's
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Definitely. Comments from the public?
Yeah. There's stuff missing here. First of all, to fiscal matters, there should be a monthly report on business completed for the month, rental income, there's no way to talk about the financial conditions without talking about the pluses and minuses. Now, I know I've heard some of you say, oh, but we're not here to make money. Well, that may be true, but what you don't measure, you can't manage. And I really urge us to be really aware of the monies coming in and the liabilities. The second things are the legal challenges, and also what I don't see here it is a special project, but like this, the Hansel project, you know, this is not being discussed. You guys are not talking in public about the cost, the problems, the challenges, and certainly you didn't want to talk to the public's.
Stephen, you're off topic. This is an administrative calendar.
Yeah, I understand, but would you please not argue with me while I'm speaking? Can I speak, and then maybe you can comment, but you're talking while I'm talking.
It's all untrue, it's lies. There are so many lies in each of your statements.
Okay,
It's just tiring.
so it is tiring to be called a liar, and that is an insult, and I'm sure you're nice outside this building, but please don't call me a liar, okay? I'm simply trying to address concerns that I have. The concerns are, I want you guys to succeed. Believe it or not, I want you to succeed. And I don't see how you can succeed unless you have the full grasp of all the ins and outs of what's happening here.
We do.
This is partial. Well, let's talk about that later. Okay.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, now moving on to item number 4, district manager report. We have Eric's report that I think everyone reviewed, and then he had the update closer in that it sounds like the sinkhole, that the approval process is moving along in that. Did you guys see that?
Yes, with one minor hitch.
Yes.
Yes.
That they're trying to work out without going through another bureaucratic rabbit hole.
Yes. Any questions, comments on the district manager report?
I just would like to add that I'm thrilled that we have the YouTube capability, but I would also love to have the A-frame signs that alert the community that we do have meetings coming up. I think it's simple, it's inexpensive. I don't understand why we can't do it.
This is the sandwich boards?
Yes.
Yeah, so is that a big deal? Are they in use for something else? I mean, could we put them out in front of the community center?
Yeah, we do tend to have sandwich boards available. We can put signs out for meetings for sure.
Thank you.
Tell you what, I'll volunteer to come down and help you.
I'm sure that's necessary.
Any other comments on the district manager's report?
I was pleased to see, the possibility of some grant funding. And otherwise, no further comments. I'm just hopeful that this last thing on the pipe actually does resolve itself before the rains come.
Okay. Comments from the public?
Yeah, sure. Why aren't we getting full report from the district manager? There are a couple other very important things. Of course, the maintenance project has been delayed yet again for another 30 days. There's challenges there. Why aren't we seeing reports? Okay, this is the obligation to communicate with the public. You're not a private agency. You're not a communist dictator or whatever. Commissary, I don't even know what they call them. We need to have more information. The second thing is this week, or actually about a week ago, a report came out about arrest information. There was a sex crime, an armed sex crime, an attempted rape in this building. You all knew about it. It happened April 7th, and it was suppressed from the community, and I don't believe a thing was done about it. And because it hasn't been announced, I'll tell people what this person, Jordan Alicio Escobar Perez, was arrested for. He was resisting arrest. There was sexual battery. You all have daughters. How would you like your daughter to have a Glock pointed at her head and demanded for sex? Why did you not tell the community? Why didn't you act? There's lots of things we could have done. We can put in a video surveillance in around here, that we can ban alcohol at events. There's a lot of stuff. And the fact that you didn't say anything is just, it's absolutely disgusting. Your children, my children, are at risk. Now, this is a public facility. Crimes are going to happen here. But we have to take our responsibility as in the public seriously. We have to do things positively for the safety of our community. And, you know, well, I'll talk later about this, but some of the comments are just absolutely unbelievable from Eric concerning how he's handled this. And all of you knew too, so it's not all his fault.
Is that all, Stephen?
That's all I have for the moment, yes.
Just for the record, because Leah had to leave, I will be taking over for the remainder of the meeting. For the record, I feel like I need to respond to this outrageous accusation that we somehow were part of it, we knew, and we suppressed information. This is absolutely outrageous, and that's the reason I called you a liar before. First of all, it was a private event. Our community leadership cooperated with the sheriff. We went by the book. I believe everything was done that was expected of us. In addition to that, Luke is reviewing safety protocol for our community center rentals. And when they have a new policy in place or draft thereof, we will be reviewing it. We do not have safety jurisdictions here. We are not running a police department here. It's not our business to be running police operations here. We cooperated with the appropriate authority, and that's what we do. Again, the fact that you are yelling at me or the other board members for suppressing or co-conspiring to this outrageous act that happened here is appalling, and I have enough. Thank you.
So Eric didn't say anything to you?
Excuse me, this is
No, you spoke it to me. I'm going to speak back to you.
Stephen, point of order, and we're moving on.
I see. So you get to put in your little
this is
your little attack and then move on. Is this how you deal with your husband?
Please review.
Hey,
Excuse me?
don't get into personal. Don't get into personal.
I'm not getting any more
Moving
into
on
personal
with the
than I
meeting,
get
we
every
will be moving
time
on
I'm
to
here.
item number F1, which is the minutes of the joint Marinwood San Rafael Fire Commission meeting. Are there any questions from the board on the meeting minutes?
Maybe you think it's okay to have a
Well, I
break
was
here.
there. It was a wonderful event, and thank you for letting us participate and touring the facility. And it was very informational, and I made some comments at our fire commission meeting about possibly using the knowledge of their fire commission and the chief's personnel to possibly get us some grants written up that we can try again for, since now we know that they know how to get the grants. And just because we don't have it in the budget doesn't mean that we can't try to find some grants to give our firefighters some of the things that they might need.
Great. Jeff?
No questions.
I too like the idea of a joint commission meeting, if not for anything else, just to inspire new fire in our commission and hopefully get them excited about the ample opportunities to be part of the wildfire prevention program, such as the chipper days, such as educating the community. These are all untapped opportunities for our fire commission, in my opinion. Moving on to, I'm sorry, public comment on F1.
Well, yeah, so this happened in San Rafael, and I'm unclear if that was a one-off thing or you're suggesting that it happened all the time in San Rafael. Because if that's the case, then I do think that needs to be reviewed and brought before the community, because we do still have two separate fire districts, two separate fire commissions, and even though we want them working together, let's.
I did not imply that they would be all the time together.
So maybe I didn't understand your comments. You said it was great that they're working together. I agree with that. That's fine. I just want to make sure we're doing it local. So if people, especially with all this fire stuff coming down, people are going to want to know what's happening in our fire commission, fire department.
Chief, do you want to say why we had it at the San Rafael office?
We share access to the new training facility and fire station at 52, and we wanted to be able to show the commission the facility that had just been utilized for the purposes of the Joint Fire Academy, where a Marinwood firefighter was trained alongside of San Rafael firefighters and Central Marin firefighters. It's an example of great regional cooperation.
Well, I think that's great. Okay, that's one off. That's not a big deal.
So then moving on to item F2, which is the draft minute of Fire Commission meeting of September 3rd. Any questions from the board or comments?
I have a problem. Do we have a single acting engineer now or more than one?
A single acting.
Okay, so what we're trying to do is get someone in that position who is certified to be an engineer. Is that correct? And when's the expected completion of that testing, when we might have you report that we have such a person?
We had a written exam last week, and if both of those individuals are successful, then that should be announced tomorrow.
Oh.
So you're jumping the gun. You can't say anything.
I'm being careful not to jump the gun.
Okay.
We have a practical exam, which is next week.
Mm-hmm.
So we anticipate we could fill the position before the end of the month.
Okay.
And
okay, that's good. Let's see. There was something in the review of the 3,000 homes or whatever, and there were 237 homes that need some remediation. How will they be notified and when?
So that's a process that we're working through, and how to make those we're actually going to notify everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And in that process, these were, I think they're commonly referred to as windshield surveys, or
Sure.
we walked. They didn't do a complete 360 of the property and enter the backyard, unless of course there were residents there in the process of while we were conducting those surveys, and then they did. But the hope is to do those notifications within the next 30 to 45 days.
Oh, okay, great. That's good news.
I just want to interrupt for a moment. We were reviewing the draft minutes of the Fire Commission meeting.
Yes.
Did you
Oh, I thought you just said the chief's report.
No,
Didn't we just do
Fire
that?
Commission.
That was we first did the Joint Fire Commission, and now we're doing the
sorry.
draft.
So,
But
yeah.
since
This was discussed actually at the Fire
It
Commission
was.
meeting.
Oh, that's why I just wanted to clarify.
they-
But
yes.
it's maybe a nice lead
That's
in.
right. Give me a hint when I can start shooting my mouth off again next time.
So just any questions from the audience on the draft minutes of the commission meeting? Hearing none, please continue. Thank you. We are now officially on item F3.
Okay, chief report. Okay, let's see. Are these NRGs an extension of CERT, or is this a completely separate?
It's a new look at CERT and applying them to the larger neighborhood. And it's being used as a nationwide model. So Quinn Gardner, our emergency manager that we're sharing together, she held a meeting and actually had all of the neighborhoods. And much like our discussion about fires, they don't know any boundaries, all the emergency activity. And so we brought together this CSD, Marinwood, the two CSAs, 13 and 19, and then San Rafael, and had a meeting with every neighborhood group. We invited every single neighborhood, and they sent representatives. So Marinwood was well represented, and I think it's something that you're going to hear some more about, and I hope to have a report in the next couple of months about some outcomes and some actions.
Very good, okay. I don't mean to harp on this, but I ask you this all the time. And I usually get a pretty good smile out of you when I do. But I always thought that FANN was false alarm and no need. And I got a smile. Great. So things are consistent. But I also noticed that there were 11 calls that were canceled en route, but they were not, it didn't appear to me they were included in the table. Why?
Because there were really, in some cases, they don't even leave the station.
Oh.
So, I mean, there's no call associated with it.
Oh, okay. When I saw canceled en route, I assumed that meant they haven't even left the station in some of those cases. Okay.
They're just canceled immediately and they find out, hey, it's a false alarm, whatever the circumstance.
Okay, I would have thought that would have fallen under the false alarm, no need category. But, okay, all right. A little different than it used to be when I was on the commission. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. Okay. Yeah. I have one question. How do you utilize the Marinwood's website in communicating with Marinwood residents? Because you specifically refer to San Rafael Fire Department's emergency management website. Is there anything that we need to help you with?
So we're trying to provide some linkage between the two websites, so we're still working on that to make sure links, so we're being able to duplicate the information but not creating a whole new website.
Are you getting enough support from our end of?
Yes, and we're kind of working through it.
Okay.
So, but so far so good. And I also wanted to comment while we were talking about it, kind of this AmeriCorps effort. We think it's we received a response back from AmeriCorps on the proposal that we made, the grant funding. Mm-hmm. And you might know that we did this earlier this year and had an 8-person AmeriCorps team that did work on vegetation management and also provided assistance to seniors and or low-income residents that weren't able to do and complete defensible space on their own. So I'm hopefully within the next 2 weeks, we'll have some knowledge whether or not that's approved, but that could really be a benefit to the community, and we'll have an active team that can work not only with the district and our open space that abuts improved property structures, but also individual homeowners. So we're really excited about that. We also have 2 new vegetation management specialists. They're part-time, but we hope to have them starting at the end of this month. And one is going to be working directly in Marinwood. So I think that'll be significant. Also tomorrow night at the B Street Community Center in San Rafael, we're going to present a Living with Fire in Marin County. And the program's from 7 to 9 p.m. And last but not least, we mentioned the graduation that we had a few weeks ago, but I'm pleased and proud to say, we're at full staff. We have 3 Marinwood fire paramedics on staff. There was a day last week when I came over and we had 2 Marinwood fire paramedics on engine 58. And so we've significantly improved the service, and I think it's something that we all should be proud of, that we've increased the level of service into the community, not only for the residents, but also the firefighters themselves. And it's working very well.
That's great news. Thank you very much, Chief. Any questions from the public for the Chief? Go ahead, Stephen.
Actually, just a comment. First of all, I continue to maintain great confidence in Chief Gray, and I'm so happy that he's pulling for Marinwood. One of the things, I was talking to Jeff earlier about dreaming big and thinking how you can, solve the big issues. What I see in Marinwood is, I hate to put it this way, we're an ambulance agency that fights fires, and somehow it just seems so inefficient the way that we deploy our resources, that if you're going to extract dollars to do the more important stuff of fighting fires, the wildfire thing, I think there needs to be a reevaluation, a fundamental reevaluation. Also, you need to get bigger to deploy more resources. But I have every confidence in your ability, Chief Gray, to be a leader for Marin, maybe even set some national standards of how firefight forces work in the future.
Thank you, Stephen.
Director, just one final comment. Tomorrow is the 18th anniversary of 9/11, that fateful day, and just a reminder that all of the fire stations will pay honor and tribute to the losses experienced that day at just prior to 7 a.m. And so they'll be gathering around the flagpole. The public is invited to participate, and there's a brief moment of silence and then actually a recognition and tones that are provided by the Marin County Dispatch Center. So, thank you.
And that includes our fire station. There's a question about that fire station.
Yes, all fire stations in Marin County are participating.
Yes.
That's right near that flag that we,
No, I know. Linda, I'm just saying that Linda had specifically requested to know about the details for 9/11
And I included Linda on my email that I distributed.
Thank you.
regarding
Thank you. So the next of the Fire Commission meeting will be October 1st, and I take it will take place right here.
Yes.
Moving on to item G1 is the draft minutes of the Park and Rec Commission meeting. Any questions from the board? None? None on that one?
I'm looking at the agenda.
Yvonne?
No.
Okay. From the public, Stephen?
Yeah, so we don't have enough information there. I did see the video, and I'm going to go right to public comment on non-agenda items. It was written up, Commission receives comments regarding incident at Community Center. Now, Tiffany, I know exactly what it was. It was about the sexual assault in the community center. You didn't write it down. This is a major crime that occurred here. And once again, you're hiding it from the public by referring to it as an incident. I demand that if we're going to pay somebody to do minutes, that it be accurate minutes, because to put this disinformation out is it's actually bad for the public. So I leave it to you as representatives to do the right thing here.
Thank you, Stephen. Item G2 is the Recreation and Park Maintenance Activity Report. Do we have any questions from the board?
yeah, I have a couple.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Where are we with regard to getting bids on the pool resurfacing?
So we've received one so far, and I know Eric's working on getting the proposal out on a couple various job listservs and different posting areas to get some more bids. So I'm not sure how many more we've received, but I know that we're currently advertising it with hopes of getting some more bids this time.
Okay. I mean, this can happen anywhere, at any time during, the hiatus between the pool seasons, or would it be really nice to have it before it started raining?
I know that from what I've heard, the wet weather does delay certain aspects of the work, but I mean, that's when everybody does their resurfacing jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I know the last time we had it done, we didn't go out to bid until October 30th. I found the file, so when we were open before March, for the swim team that particular year. I don't know what the current, the economy is with those companies and how busy their workload is, but I think we're in line to be able to secure, someone to get the job done before we open. So
Okay, it'd be good to have at least 2 and hopefully 3 bids. But okay,
absolutely, yeah.
Understood. You mentioned something about the creek side and working with one group. What is and is not allowable in shoring up a creek side? Can you do shiprap? I mean, what can you do?
I actually met with John from the straw program and another, someone that he works with that's an erosion specialist today. We went out and looked at some of the areas that we've experienced a lot of erosion, and we lost a tree over in the park earlier this year. And there are limitations to what you can do in terms of shoring up the creek. If we were to try to do a major creek bank restoration project, there would be a lot of permits and agencies involved, and it would be a really big project with a lot of grant money and what have you, and a lot of approved methods to do that. Mostly be probably putting things like boulders on the sides of things. Just based on what we talked about today, these two gentlemen who are not going on record or giving us any official assessment of anything, just gave me some recommendations for some very affordable plantings that we can be doing with just trees that naturally grow in the area. They're pointing out some of the natural saplings that are already coming through, growing on their own. Ways that we can add to that to just increase the root structures and shore up some of the areas that are that have been hit by some of the storms lately. And but as far as any big major project, was sort of just keep an eye on things, and if we start to see something where any of our infrastructure is really at risk, then we can start the process of looking at a bigger scale assessment and doing some big action.
Baby steps first, and then.
Yeah, exactly. But at this point, it's just all natural. Add some local, natural, native plantings that would be growing there anyway. Sort of shore those up and try to tend to those, and then if some things get to a point where we're worried about them, then we can address that on a bigger scale. And John said that the straw program would be very willing to provide us at least advice and maybe get involved in helping us with those plantings if we want to go that route. We can look at securing funding and that. So it was a good meeting, and they kind of gave me a little bit of optimism about the whole situation.
Very good. Okay. One last quick question: how often do we do this refinishing of the parquet floor in the big room?
The floor was, so we do a recoating every year at the end of the summer, just after all the wear and tear that we have throughout the year. They come through and they sort of buff it and put a new coat of the finish on it. What we did this last week, or 2 weeks ago now, was sand it and refinish it, and that's something that we lasted in 2014.
So for 5 years.
So yeah, I mean, they said with proper care, and if we don't experience a lot of abuse on the floor, we could get 7 to 10 years out of what's left of the current wood on there. But we're at the sort of the end of the lifespan.
I was going to say,
there.
yeah. So. I mean, you sand it every 5 years. Eventually, you're going to be having veneer for it.
Yeah, exactly. So it looks good. He said, yeah, and they gave us some products to use to clean it and give it, kind of the most lifespan we can get out of it at this point.
Okay, understood. Nice job this summer, by the way, for all of you.
Yeah.
Good job. Thanks.
So I would love to make a comment. Awesome. Thank you. It was a wonderful summer. My girls loved it, including pool. So now we're done. I see that we're doing the grass and everything. Are we also doing the upkeep of the water fountains that are always a question and stuff, since now there's less kids coming through? They should be blocked less often, but maybe if we could do a walkthrough and get them all working at the same time.
Yeah, comment on the water fountains. I'm sorry that our the local resident didn't stay for this part of it, but yeah, the water fountains are an ongoing issue and not unique to summer camp.
Yeah.
Almost weekly, the park staff witnesses kids in the mini park throwing sand and dirt into the drain of the drinking fountain, and it's one of those things that we wish the nannies and parents would prevent that activity. There's a lot of different models of drinking fountains. We're probably due for a couple upgrades to some of them, but kids throwing dirt into the drinking fountain is going to be an issue for pretty much any model of drinking fountain. So they do clear them, multiple times a week, and it's an ongoing, challenge, but, they tend to mostly be cleared out, and we do have a lot of helpful residents keeping an eye on them and alerting us when there is an issue, so.
All right, just wanted to make sure it was on record that you guys were doing.
Thank you.
From me, just one question is, when could we expect the financials for the summer camp? And
We usually present at once the pool season is closed, and because that's usually part of the report that
So
we've
it's
been
one-
doing. But yeah, so we're still kind of analyzing everything, and once we close on October 11th for the pool. We usually present like the full summer, including the pool season at that point.
yeah, I didn't remember when exactly that happened.
Yeah.
Is that in November?
Typically,
Because
yeah.
if you close the 11th, then it would be the November.
So that
That's something that goes
that
on
can
our
go on the
list.
calendar.
Yeah, that was back
Thank
in
you, great
November.
minds think alike. And then the second question was, you mentioned the landscaping and Marinwood entrances. Would that include the corner of the Lucas Valley and Marinwood Avenue here?
Yes. Oh, you mean Miller Creek and?
I'm sorry, and Miller Creek and.
Yeah, so this has been on, I think I've been listening to this on reports for like over a year now. The big bay tree on the corner there is not gonna make it, and we've had a couple different arborists come out and look at that. So that's gonna have to come out, which is gonna be a big hole in, not expense so much, but it's gonna be a big hole in the landscape, and it's gonna be a big change to the aesthetic, and we're just working on a couple different plans for what we're going to do in the area and what we're going to put in its place, and it's going to be a big project. That whole area this needs kind of a big overhaul. So that one, it's going to require a lot of manpower and a lot of hours. So we've been working on that, but that planning process has been going on for a while now. What we're going to do.
Do you want to present to the commission maybe at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a few different ideas and directions we want to go in, and I'm sad that Victor is not going to be here to help us because he had a lot of vision, a lot of passion for that area, and had been a part of some of the projects there. So, but yeah, that will definitely be something we want to present to the commission upcoming, and sooner than later.
Speaking of which, do we have any applicants?
No applicants as of yet. We've got the job posted a few different places, and we're adding to that. And it took us, a little while just to get things printed up and drafted how we wanted to advertise that and make sure everything was relevant. We haven't hired a parks maintenance full-time worker since 2002, and so some of our literature needs to kind of come up to 2019 standards, and so it's been a little bit of a process, but we've brought someone on part-time that's kind of helping fill the void. It's been working out great, and we hope to be bringing candidates in, within the next month. So.
Great.
Cool. Thank you. Questions from the public? Steve?
Yeah, okay, so first, I have questions of both sections. First, with recreation, how's the pickleball study coming along? I say that in jest because I know you haven't done anything about it, and pickleball's grown in Marin County. It's about $20 in paint to put lines down, and it serves an active population of seniors. So I don't know why we're missing out on that opportunity. I urge you to move forward on it. You might have seen an article recently where there's actually a private pickleball club opening up in Sausalito. In general, okay, I guess this goes to park maintenance. I'm very dissatisfied with the idea that we put fences up every time we have a maintenance issue and we don't try to repair what we have. The park has gotten smaller in the last few years because of these fences, and I think it detracts from the usability of the park. The other thing is the guys are driving heavy equipment on the turf, and that damages the turf, and it just doesn't make sense to That dump trailer weighs about 4,000 pounds. I don't know what 6,000 pounds maybe for the truck, and then you fill it up. That's a big, heavy load to put on our turf. So I encourage you to find ways to use the smaller vehicles like other park maintenance crews do in other areas. I know certainly at McGinnis Park. We've got erosion issues in the nature area, and I would like to see the beginnings of some restoration there. There are plows that plowing devices that you can put on the little, whatever it is, a Kubota or whatever, and drag behind it. It looks like something a farmer would use, but it would overturn all that soil back there in that big open space, and you have a chance to, with work over a number of years, you can actually restore that area to a much better area. That area, it really wasn't the fault currently, but in the past, Gary and the crew used to drive heavy equipment over there all the time, store concrete, really basically abuse the landscape. And you know, it is part of the park, and it's part of what the public wants to use. And so therefore, I mean, we're not just doing summer programs, we're also maintaining the park. Lastly, I caution you about doing a repaving project next to Miller Creek and the associated toxic runoff risk that's happening there. I don't know where that project is, but I would like to see a more environmental alternative considered up there. And then one last thing is, I think your staff, especially as you're doing transition, really should have open space training so they really know about the proper care of a natural landscape and trails. We concentrate on the flowers over here, but it's only really a small portion of all the acreage that we enjoy.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. Item G3, which is just a reminder, next Park and Rec Commission meeting will take place on September 24th. And so moving on to item H1, which is new and other business, resolution 2019-06. We are approving the form of and authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding and authorizing participation in the Special District Risk Management Authority's Health Benefits Program. It's an action item for the board, and Eric is not here to present it, and Leah is not here to present it, so we are left with the memorandum that was prepared for us. And are there any questions from the board? Or comments?
I'll make some comments because I asked for a copy of the original JPA so I could find out what was changing. Okay, so in a nutshell, number one, he points out in his email or his memo that it's life insurance and employee assistance program that we're involved in. But for all intents and purposes, the changes are simply in item 4, paragraph 3, adding up to including termination from the program for late payments and language covering mid-year events. Former paragraph 4B regarding termination was removed, and number 6 removes the CSAC EIA, which is California State Association of Counties Excess Insurance Authority, as the standard outlining coverage under the program, and replaces it with coverage details from each carrier of each policy. That's it. It doesn't, I mean, we're being asked to approve this, but it has absolutely no impact whatsoever on our program.
Thank you so much for all the detailed information. Sivan? So may I have a motion then?
Yes, I'll I'll move that we approve the form and authorization of the execution of the memorandum of understanding and authorizing participation in the Special District Risk Management Authority's Health Benefits Program.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. Open to the public, questions, comments? Go ahead.
If you don't understand it, don't vote it on it. There's only 3 of you here present. I think such a commitment requires, full participation of the board. Notwithstanding Jeff's characterizations, there may be some other issues there. But if you just want to rubber stamp it, go ahead. But I think you shouldn't rush into something that you don't fully understand and have the benefit of the experience of your fellow board members.
Thank you for your opinion, and I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Having 3 votes in favor, out of 5 potential at any given moment, the motion would have passed regardless. And so we're moving on to item number I, which is board member items of interest or requests for future agenda items. And just for the record, it is the board members who may ask the president and the district manager to include something on a future agenda item, but there is really no provision for the public to be requesting an item on the future agenda. I had to re-educate myself following the last month's meeting. So is there anything from the board?
I don't have any requests currently for future agenda items. But I do just want to mention in passing, several months ago, I recognized 2 youths in Upper Lucas Valley, Georgia Lee and Mitchell Tanaka, for their creation of a documentary called The Silent Legacy about the graveyard up here on Lucas Valley Road. My understanding is they have now at least cleaned the brush and done some work around that graveyard. I was actually going to walk up there today and find out if they've actually built a fence around it, but I didn't have time to do it. But it sounds like they are actually getting some traction and putting some sort of respectful barrier around that graveyard. And I just wanted to acknowledge it. That's it.
Here. Salam?
Just possibly an update from the chief about the movement about the JPA.
I would like to request 2 things from the look of you. One would be the very high level kind of revenue expenditure account of each program. So for example, adult yoga, roughly costs and expenditures and the revenues. And then the second thing would be maybe just what tools do you use to keep track of things getting done when they need to get done? So is there like a monthly list of responsibilities for the park staff that you go at some point and check, make sure that things have been completed, or a weekly one, whatever. So basically, I would like to see a list like that, and then the expenditures and revenues by program. Yeah. Motion to adjourn?
I have something to say.
There is
after
no
this.
public comment here.
Well,
so
I don't think
is
that
there a
that's
motion?
actually correct, so I'll just go ahead and say
I'll
it.
second.
We need to have business,
All in
monthly
favor?
business,
Aye.
okay.
Thank you.